who should be included, because they had, they'll be added based on their appropriate expertise and stuff like that. So a lot of it was quite loose, but I think there may be refinements that the general group wants to have, because I think we will need this just for all of the committees. And then the other aspect of it is going to be thinking about how authorship order is decided as well.
Yeah. I think up until this point, ISCET has been all about making sure that anybody who has an interest can be involved, and that everyone's views are included and so on. Rush has done some great work producing a kind of outline template of how kind of a code of conduct for ISCET, essentially, and that's on the forum. She's posted that there. I've put some comments on it, and that will be brought to the next proper ISCET meeting, which hopefully will be arranged soon. I think this is a good time in general for ISCET to be kind of getting these things in place, working out how the subcommittees work. We've now got these two experiences. There's this one, and of course the nystagmus subcommittee as well, which have come up with great suggestions for how we can do this in the future. I think in general things have gone pretty well so far. Actually, we've not had any big clashes or anything, despite it's kind of everybody still getting into that would be worse than it has been, but it's been absolutely great. So so I think I think we can feed back to the general nystagmus, the general ISCET group about what we've learned, how we think should be done differently. Maybe it's worth us kind of compiling a list of things that we learned from this, and Russia will be organising that soon. But do have a look on the main ISCET website, because there's the documents there which Russia has produced on the forum to go through it and comment on. I have found the document from the Helena and Rebecca sent out. I'm trying to think how I can best share this with you now.
Sorry, Matt, I don't know if it's like this for everyone, but your voice is dropping in and out a lot for me.
Oh, sorry. Is that the case for anyone else? It's coming and going. Okay. I don't know what I can do about that. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I've got this document here, which was sent by Helena and Rebecca when they set up the nystagmus working committee. I think it was a great idea. It was basically a framework for authorship and how that would be decided from the outset. I don't think it's unreasonable for us to apply this now, so long as everybody who isn't in the meeting also has a chance to go through that, because of course some people might be able to not make it because of time commitments. So
is it basically in agreement with international authorship requirements?
It's
good to just refer to what's
I guess there is a generally accepted list of what constitutes suitability for authorship. I don't know about that. I mean, I have seen this before where there is a very specific kind of these are what should be required. I don't know, but I can tell you what, Gemma, shall I send this to you? The document that Helena sent out, and then we can work on that.
I think this is kind of an evolving thing, as Matt said, that ISCET's probably worthwhile for broader discussion. I think the best thing to do is for maybe me to, when I circulate the notes and the actions from today's meeting, I'll circulate that also and ask people to read that and consider it and feedback any comments. And if there are comments that we haven't thought of, that'll probably be helpful for the wider ISCET discussion. But yeah, if you would like, if you could send those, that would be helpful. I just couldn't find them.
No, okay.
Are there any differences between them and what the journal of where we're intending to publish this? That's my only sort of question, is sometimes the journal and things don't perfectly align. And I think if we are, similar to how ISCET has got a particular journal that they usually publish their standards and things in, I think we might want to align, if we're thinking it'll be that journal, we might want to align what we put out as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I haven't matched the two up, but the nystagmus subcommittee ones are more kind of principles, aren't they? And trying to be upfront about expected contribution if you are a named author on a piece of work. So it's not so fine-grained as the nitty-gritty of what you've done. It's more the principles of it. But I can circulate it and ask people to review it and see what they think.
Cool.
Okay, so I have got some notes that I'm making for this meeting. I'll just pop those in the chat as well. We just had a couple of actions from the meeting in February. I know a couple are complete, so the actions were to double check the consent and all the, so that we could more accurately report the number of people who didn't progress through all of the individual statements in the consent form, and that is complete. And the other one that is complete, that was one of mine, was to send C1 and Matt the recording, which has been done. But there were a couple of other actions which I believe are done, because I've seen some of the conversations that Fiona and Matt and that little subgroup with Daniel and C1 is about the sharing the coding and checking the coding of all the data, and also starting to graph and analyze the data. So I assume that's all complete, and that's what we're going to discuss today.
Well, there's some issues that arose that require bringing to the bigger group.
Okay.
That's what we wanted to do. And also to write up how we have coded it for this appendix that will be data handling procedures. So I tried to put some notes under each plot to kind of say what had surfaced in plotting as well. Because, you know, there's certain rows or something where something might be a little bit arbitrary, but there were also in the comments to the Excel file circulated just some comments that remained unresolved, where there is no clear right and wrong, and it's more about just getting some agreement on how to handle it.
Okay. How is best to go through that, Fiona? Is that all in the...
So I made a bit of a mess in the Google Drive because I realized that I can add documents, but I can't move them and I can't delete them.
Okay.
So I uploaded a whole slew of plots and I tried to put them in a folder, like inside this like temporary folder that I made, and it put shortcuts into the folder I was trying to move them in, but didn't move the plots at all. And it's a bit of a mess. So
okay.
If it would be possible to get like access to be able to also delete like those shortcuts and stuff, that would be helpful. But I have like the latest version of the PDF where I put some notes under each plot in there somewhere. Maybe I'll try and find it and just send a link in the chat.
Yeah. You look like you've got all the access, Fiona, so I'm not exactly sure why that's not working.
I don't know. Is there any global setting where nothing can be deleted or moved or something?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure. I can have a little.
Because otherwise, I was just too early uploading it.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a sandpit folder where I could.
If we can't work that out simply, then you and I can just have a couple of minutes afterwards, and you can tell me what to move or what to delete.
Okay. I think I've found the link to the most current one. Let me see. I'll share this.
So hopefully we can resolve all these remaining, because there wasn't very many outstanding issues, right? I'm kind of going through the spreadsheet. Maybe 4 or 5 points we only need to discuss.
Yeah, for me it would be great also just to get a bit of more clarity on how the plots should look, you know, what you want to include and so on, because at the moment I've included, for example, the unanswered number. I don't know if you want that everywhere. So I'm just going to send this link in the chat.
Brilliant.
Does that work out?
Yep, I see
it. So yeah, I've kind of just tried to do the plots that do you want to just get stuck into this now, or what, Gemma?
Yeah, that's fine with me, unless anybody's got anything that they think we should discuss first, but I'm happy to just dive in.
I think that sounds good. Do you want to screen share and kind of work through the things you wanted to clarify? Like, is it easiest just to put up the Excel?
Sure, I can do that. Can I? Yeah. Okay. Does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I tried to work through what I had in notes from the last meeting about what to include. These can be changed. It's pretty easy. It's scripted now, so it's pretty easy to change things around and change colors or different formats and so on. But the first one was just this question about involvement with eye tracking. And I've included, I think it's 121 in total. Does that sound right to people?
It does.
And not everybody answered the question, so you can see that 43 people didn't answer. And otherwise, you can see, we had 34 people who performs and interprets. I put in neither here, where I'm not sure if that was a categorical variable or if I just took it as neither, where they had responded to everything else, but there was not filled in here. And then you have no response. So most of the ones who don't do either are, manufacturers and those who selected professional body. So it's not a huge surprise. But just underneath, you can see these coding issues. And I've given row numbers where someone selected professional body in the text, but the categorical variable is blank, for example. So I've assigned them to no response for now. And then row 70, other was a researcher performing eye tracking. And that was coded both as professional body and perform eye tracking. So just some small things like that on each plot are there to double check. And I don't know, Matt, whether you feel up to just double checking that. In
the spreadsheet, I've got the spreadsheet open now.
Okay.
So let's start with this one. On row 51, they selected professional body in the text. I thought that was a drop down.
It probably means in the text base. I think when I said in the text, I just mean the text-based variables.
Right, okay. Yeah, so this person is listed as professional body under Q4 CAT professional. When you say row, it is row 51, not...
Yeah.
They're all, no matter where we move from here, they're all... there is one at 55, so actually you've...
It may be that it's... I extracted a CSV file which removed the second row of headings, so it may be slightly offset.
Okay, but even if it was offset by 1... Yeah, okay. I'm seeing one at row 55 where it says that they are involved in something called nanos, and then they haven't chosen anything for whether they are...
That rings a bell, actually.
And
Hang on, I'm on row 51 of the XLS, and that's going with question 4, I'm involved with the professional body, but then the text, which of the following best describes your involvement with clinical eye tracking, is empty. So I'm wondering if that still lines up, but on the XLS file.
So on the XLS file, it's row 55. That's the one that seems to be...
Is it the one that's got nanos as
I'm trying to work out where...
Nanos rings a bell, actually, because I removed it from the notes because I was like, I don't know what that is.
Oh,
isn't it the Neuro-Ophthalmological Society?
I think this is just an error in the coding. That should be a 1 in that. In AB 55 should be 1 because they have chosen I am involved with the professional body.
Right.
So that's an error at our end, so we can update that. I'll make the changes here, and then I can provide a final version to us later on. So that was just an error for us. That becomes
okay.
Yeah. So NANOS is a North American Neuro-Ophthalmological Society.
Yeah.
But hang on, coming back to row 51, sorry, I'm confused now because they don't have anything in that text box.
Sorry, we were talking about row 55, weren't we?
It's
Yeah,
row 55, and it's the question is actually Q4, which is column V.
Yeah. I think I'm there, but I'm.
It may be that the row number is different because I extracted a CSV because the Excel files, just by saving them in Excel, you introduce like extra spaces and stuff that mess up the code. So this is based on the
They're with me in the same spot. Gemma, I think, is there in the same spot. That's what I'm. Yeah.
Oh, but this is the one online, so it's changed a lot probably since then.
Oh yeah, that's true, because we've done a lot of changes.
Because if you open it in Google Drive, it actually introduces loads of extra characters and stuff that was really messing us up. So we ended up emailing the Excel file until that was agreed. And then I extracted a CSV because a CSV file won't have any extras. It won't. Everybody can open it. So
Fiona, would it be better for me to make the changes on the CSV then, rather than what you sent around? Was that? I'm trying to work it. Oh, that was the CSV. Yeah, so I'll make the changes on ISCET data clean.csv.
That would be great. Yeah, and actually, Matt, I uploaded it might be an older version now because I made these new heat map plots, but I uploaded a script as well, so you can see.
Got it.
So even whether you're kind of comfortable with Python or not, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to just run it, like use idle or something and just run it, and you'll get all the plots. So
brilliant. Thank you very much.
Try to make it so that if I get knocked over by a bus tomorrow, you can still continue, as we say. So yeah, it might be that the row number has changed from the online version, also because there were several rows of titles to the variables, and I reduced that to just one for the purposes of.
So for the CSV, it's row 54. For the XLS, it's row 55. That's the one with the comments still in it. But either way, it's just a mistake in terms of there wasn't a 1 in that column. So we've sorted that. Then if we go to row 70 was the next thing. So let's see if we can work all these out while we're here.
There's a lot, in fairness. There's I have notes under each plot. So I don't know if you want to try and do it now or offline. It's up to you.
I'm happy to do it while we're here, as long as the others have the availability to do that.
Yeah, happy to just resolve what needs resolving whilst we've got different sets of eyes on it.
Other research performing ET code is both preferred.
I think what Amanda was saying about the figure 1 coding issues is the beginning of it says row 51 selected professional body, but it's blank. So are there, I guess before we move on, are there others of those where it is still blank?
It's just that the row number has changed, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this individual, they said other, and then what they actually wrote was, as a researcher, perform clinical eye tracking, but the clinical decisions are done by others, and the relation between these decisions and data quality are discussed with me/us. So that means they're definitely performing clinical eye tracking. Decisions are being made on their data, but they're not the ones actually doing it. And they've also, this one, we seem to have coded it as professional body, but I don't see why that's the case. So actually, I suspect this is just
maybe they said in one of the other text responses.
Could be somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of.
I do remember this. Yeah.
They often get the same question more than once, or rather, it exists more than once in the file.
Yeah, because depending on their response to the question, then
what way it was
slightly
rated.
different wording was populated.
Yeah.
So row 73 on the CSV.
It's row 74 on the Google.
Correct. Yeah.
When you say row 73, is that including the row with the variable headings?
Yes. Yeah. On the CSV, it is of the
the
document.
So that's why the offset is there.
Yeah.
So it's rows without the headings, if you like.
I mean, from the Google Doc, I can't see a response that makes me think they are representing a professional body.
I agree. I've just been through them all as well, and I don't see anything like that.
I think it's more that they are performing the eye tracking, although they're not a clinician. And it sounds like they perform and interpret.
Yeah. Well, they don't personally interpret because the interpretations are done by others.
But then it says the clinical decisions, but then there's discussion with me.
Okay, that's true. So there is some interpretation. I'd be comfortable then with, I mean, I don't think, I agree with you, they're not a professional body, so I'm happy to delete that. And we could put them down as perform and interpret. I would be comfortable with that.
I guess the question then is, if they're not a manufacturer, they're not a professional body, they're probably, are they clinical is probably the question, isn't it?
Well, sounds like they're a technician collecting data for clinical purposes, because clinical decisions are made as a result of the data they collect. So that...
Well, did they say technician or researcher? Because I'm pretty sure that your exclusion variable at the end removes them on the basis of researcher, even though many researchers work in hospitals and collect the data.
It does say that there are clinical decisions as a result of the data they collect. So they say they're a researcher, so that would potentially exclude them. But then if what they're doing is actually changing the outcome of the patient, which it sounds like it is, then I would say that would be okay to include.
So I think that would probably reintroduce quite a few researchers as relevant.
Okay.
It would kind of guess me actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably something that's really relevant for now, but also going forward as well.
Yeah,
I can see this being potentially a category that's bigger than we realise.
Yeah,
that people aren't necessarily employed on a clinical contract, but their information is being used clinically.
Yeah, I mean, university teaching hospitals, it's the main of thing. And we even have this new technical university hospital that we've just created between our university and the hospital. And the contracts, the clinicians working in the hospital are employed by the university as professors. So it's... There was also, just to point out, and we'll see it in further plots, there was a category of doctor, which I've changed to medical doctor. But, you know, neurologists, for example, and ENTs might fit in, might have that medical degree, but, you know, audiologists and others who are working in the hospital may not. So the categories are not mutually exclusive and a little tricky. And so I think it's easier to discuss when we actually have the data in front of us and can kind of see those categories, but it could be worth considering whether we want to collapse some of these categories.
Could you include, rather than saying clinical and thinking they're a clinical person, could we have, you know, clinical for clinical data collection? Because I do think it is that issue of researchers having that dual role, but it's still, as Matt said, changing the clinical outcomes. So that's still inputting into the clinical. Like, I would still consider them part of the clinical cycle, if that makes sense. So not fitting into professional body or manufacturer. But I'm not sure I'd want to write them off either, because I think a lot of eye movement clinics happen in that academic sense, and they sit in that weird position of you know, they're not necessarily clinically orientated. You know, they could be an engineer, for example, who's running the actual eye tracking, interpreting the eye tracking, and then sending that report back to an ophthalmologist or an optometrist.
Yeah, and very often it is the researchers who are actually analyzing the data, and the clinicians don't touch it.
Yeah,
they just look at the results. Like VHIT, for example, like, you know, what you do on the engineering side is going to dictate the results of a VHIT test.
Yep.
And it's extremely rare for any clinician to get into the raw data. They don't have time for that.
I was thinking like Larry, for example.
Sorry?
I was thinking someone like Larry.
I don't know who that is.
Larry Abel.
Yeah.
He's an electrical engineer, isn't he, originally?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's a lot of this in eye tracking, and part of this comes from the fact that eye trackers are not clinically labelled as such, and so they have to be used in a research context. But then that information can inform patient care. So, in my view, if it leads to a change in patient care of any kind, then it's a clinical use of an eye tracker, regardless of who that comes from. Now, I guess we need to go back to the original text for inclusion in this study, which I think was that definition. Gemma, do you have?
Yeah, it was. We did define it as kind of clinical use. I guess the difference is here for this figure, the respondent was asked to kind of what category they themselves went into as an individual rather than the use of the eye tracker and who they were responding on behalf of. So obviously for the professional body and the manufacturer, that's a little bit more clear cut. I do think this respondent is better under clinical, but I wonder whether to just make it clearer, whether we then say how many of those in the clinical category described themselves as researchers.
And vice versa.
Yeah, because otherwise we're going to miss that data, and that's, I think, quite important that we don't miss it.
Well, at the moment, they can have several responses. So you can be a clinician and part of a professional body and so on. So this plot represents all responses, even if the person chose more than one. But just on Matt, you were saying that eye trackers aren't clinically labeled, but they are.
Some are, yes, yeah.
So the iLink, I think, is, and the interacoustics ones are.
Interacoustics certainly is. I don't think, or at least not in the UK, there's not clinical certification for the iLink.
It's not registered as a medical device.
That's one of the barriers to it being more widely used, I think. But yeah, you're right. All of the vestibular neurology type ones, that's a much more established use case, and so plenty. There's, they are certified. For the purposes of what we're doing now, are we happy that this individual is not a professional body? Can I take out that one?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the only other thing you have to decide then is, they say they perform eye tracking. There seems to be no debate about that, but whether they interpret eye tracking is what we need to decide.
Well, that's also a little unclear to me because, for example, if I go into the raw data and I decide which data to exclude or include, and I decide how it's going to be handled in order to calculate gain or something like that, and then I produce the plot, and then a clinician looks at the plot and decides whether it's clinically relevant, then where does the interpretation start and end? For me, that's so clean cut.
Yeah, this clinical decision making, and then there's clinical, data processing, and decisions are made on that basis. So we need to come up with a clear definition. Are we saying it's the person who makes the decision based on the data, or are we saying it's everyone involved in the processing of that data?
Yeah, because
with this,
for question 38, the question is, how would you describe your professional role? And they have free typed investigating the relation between data collected and possible diagnoses.
Yeah.
So that's beyond just somebody collecting the data, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, and I keep reverting back to the VHIT test just because I've worked on that, so I'm most familiar with it. But for example, the way that I would handle the data would produce a totally different plot, potentially. In other words, the gain score would fall in or out of clinical relevance according to norms. So it's something to think about, and it's definitely something I think that should be made clear in the article, and something that we should have consensus on.
Should we maybe, I mean, we can make a note for the when we one day repeat this survey that we really need to be clearer about interpretation is really two categories. There's the clinical decision making and there's processing of data, right? And so we would ideally want to split those out in the future. And for now, we can just decide. I mean, maybe it's sounding to me more like anybody who does anything other than just operate the eye tracker.
Yeah, because in the following question, they say we, from technology, are focusing on data quality, interpretation, analysis of the eye tracking data, and how this can complement assessments.
Yeah.
So I would say this person is interpreting. They're doing more than just recording and passing that on.
Right, and I would say that's a standard sort of a position to be in as a researcher, because you do research with clinicians involved. That's your patient access.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is an unusual case. But I would even split it out in a very practical way if it were up to me and say something like, do you access the raw data? Do you decide on data quality and exclusion? Do you, and really make it concrete.
Gemma, are you noting this for next time, or shall I add this somewhere?
I think we probably need it added. I think Daniel's just joining. I think we need it added somewhere, don't we? Because it's probably part of the discussion. Yeah,
I would put it in the discussion. I would just be really straightforward about it and say these things, Daniel, these things emerged, and future research should.
At the end of all this, we could design a really good survey.
Yeah.
Well, that's basically what we're hopefully going to hand on to whoever does this next.
It's probably worth us putting a little bit of time into just making sure we've got that clearly written down, because we've got all these ideas floating about now, and if we decide 4 years from now we want to do it again, you know, it would be nice to have a concrete thing, which I guess is in paper.
Are you adding that to the draft, or do you want me to do that, Matt?
I can do that. I need to just find the draft link again.
So I'd be willing to work with you on that as well, because I think I would like to just note down a few things from having gone into the data, and I think it's true that you could really create a much more straightforward questionnaire.
Yeah. Gemma, do you have the link to hand? Otherwise, I'm digging through emails to find the actual paper as it stands.
Hi, Daniel. Just to let you know, we're recording, so just so you're aware.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I was a bit late.
No problem. We're just going through, we're on figure 1. We're just going through resolving some of the issues.
Right, I'll turn off my mic for a second while I type this up.
Is that all the issues on this figure?
No, it's not, because we've still got the one where it says other with no free text and no cap coding in neither. So we can look at those.
I'm just wondering if, I mean, I think it's going to be really hard to get through all these figures today.
I think we're looking at those ones. I mean, they said, it says other, please give details, and then they just didn't give details. So I think it's fair enough that we can't categorize them if they didn't give any information that would allow us to do that. But I appreciate, there's going to be a lot more of these things to go through.
Yeah.
But we'd need to do it at some point, right? And we're here now. I don't know if this is a good use of everyone's time, though.
Yeah, for me, the better use would be to actually say what figures we want.
Sure. Okay.
Because that we need the group for. Whereas for these small coding errors, I think that we could do that within the smaller group, maybe.
Sure.
So what do you think, Fiona? Consensus or agreement that figure 1 is helpful?
Yeah, or just to look through and kind of see which ones do we want. Do you want to include the no response bar there, for example? Or, you know, stacked plots are going to get very ugly very soon as we scroll through, and there's some alternative ways of plotting. So it's just really the practical side for me in coding it up and producing the plots, because that I can do while we wait to go through all of the coding errors. It'll just be a case of rerunning the script to get the plots with those new coding. So
my personal view is that on figure 1, the no response bar is helpful, because I think it highlights that whilst we had 121 responses, a number of people weren't giving information that allowed.
Right. And I guess one thing from my side to confirm that is to make sure that they were, all 121 were actually routed to this question.
Yes, they were, because it was the first question, wasn't it?
Mm.
Yes, they were. We've got a helper.
Sorry, guys.
Hello.
It's her bath. I don't want to go for bath, but that's okay. We're gonna
much more interesting conversation.
Maybe she has some ideas about what colors we should use here. Yeah, that's fine. So then should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is looking at whether people are aware of existing guidelines or not. And this ends up being N17. I can't quite remember why that is. Let me have a look. Oh yeah, these 4 rows selected other to question 45 with no categorical coding. So they're excluded from this figure due to, I think, a routing issue. So it would just be good to confirm that that sounds right to you. So they all said yes to question 49. And they selected other in question 45. So that's just something to confirm, but you can see that, you know, very few people are aware. Like, I think it's
question 45, are you aware of any guidelines for clinical eye tracking currently? And so this is, some people said other.
Yeah.
And then we gave them the opportunity to add details and links.
Yeah. But they didn't.
Ah, okay, because some people did, didn't they?
Potentially, but it's just something to clarify. Again, I don't know if we can clarify all these details now, but I think just to kind of explain what the issue is, that we just need to agree at some point soon on. But that is, I think, why there's 117 instead of 121.
Okay.
And that just needs to be resolved one way or other. And then did not answer, which I've coded gray here. That's the 73 dropouts who never got as far as question 45.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I don't know if you want to include this bar, you know, it's certainly not helping the beauty of the plots that much. But
it isn't, but when we have discussed kind of this in the very early stages of this, people felt that categorizing those responses was still important and helpful. So I appreciate it. It's a large bar, but ultimately it's about what this is going to look like in the future as well. So you would hope that that unknown comes down and
there's other ways of expressing that it exists, though. You know, you don't have to have it on the plot. You can say, I've put here n equals 117, but you could say in the figure, you know, what percentage of respondents actually answered as well. There's a lot of ways to do it. So I'm not suggesting hiding it, but just whether it needs to be, you know, dictating the scale on Y here, for example. Although the numbers are small, you know, so I'm kind of agnostic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Siwan and Amanda may have a different view, but I don't mind it being there.
I kind of prefer it being there. I think it makes it feel whole, like we've analysed all the pieces and they're all presented to me, but I appreciate that it could go in the text. So I'm not wedded to that idea.
Well, it's going to come up again as we go through the plot. So maybe when we've gone through them all, it'll, you know, be clearer what would make more sense.
I think it makes the rest of the plots look much more difficult to read, to be honest. It makes it's sort of squeezing them all down because they'd all be a lot taller if it wasn't there.
I mean, I could trim Y a little bit there to make it a little bit better. And I've put the numbers on top of the bars so that it, you know, you can see what you're talking about.
My view is actually to omit it, I think, because it's not that they said no, they aren't aware of guidelines. It's that they just didn't answer the question. So I would say, in my view, I put it in the caption as just, you know, 43 did not answer.
But maybe this is, so the PDF is up online. I would encourage everyone to go in and add comments. That would be really helpful for me in doing the next round. And if people could do that, and we could maybe send it out to the wider group to do so offline also, while maybe the smaller group are just checking these small coding issues, then we'd be in good shape to just run.
And Google Docs allows for commenting directly on, so that's really handy, actually.
Yeah.
So let's do that, yeah. And then how do we want to resolve these remaining issues with the spreadsheet then? Because there are, you know, we got through a couple of the ones here. I'm happy to do a pass through and see what I can do, but obviously that needs signing off by someone else.
Yeah, I think it would be great if two more, we kind of had three in agreement as our sort of, and honestly, I'm really not seeing it anymore. I tried to just, you know, keep a record of what was coming up as I was plotting, but I don't think I'm the one to check it as well, because maybe I saw something different, wrong, or, you know.
I can go through and do a first pass through this. So I'll comment on every one of these pending review issues that you've raised. I will make changes in the CSV. So obviously we no longer have comments within there, but they'll be here. And then hopefully we can then have somebody else can look at that and accept or maybe raise if they have issues with that.
So do you want that to be an action from today, Fiona, that we ask everybody to review all of these and add comments?
I think that would be good if we could, because we can, some of them are just errors, you know, where there's a floating one that we didn't spot or something, and that's pretty straightforward. But some of them are also questions like this, you know, how should we, well, there's even more kind of ones that even more would require consensus, like when we come to different categories, is this the right way to categorize this? And then I sort of put in a placeholder polling tool into the Google Drive where people could actually vote. And I think that would be the last step. When we clear all these small errors of like voting numbers or whatever, then the things that really require opinions would be good to just vote on in the tool. And then nobody has to be, you know, counting emails or stuff like this to get consensus, and we'll have a nice record.
So the main things that we want people to do is to review this document and add comments.
Yeah.
But there's a question about, should we display the no response data on the figures?
Yeah.
And the other question is about the, did you say the categorization of it?
They're going to come up in some of the other plots. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'm just trying to write those down as our actions.
Yeah. I think most of the notes are actually in this plot as well, so it could be that work is already done. So yeah, one thing is and it can be a plot by plot basis. Maybe on some plots it's important to include the non-respondents, and in others it's less so. So, you know, it doesn't have to be a global decision.
Fiona, can I just check? I've just left a comment on the first page. Can you just check you see it, just to make sure we've got that link of communication? Not yet. Okay. I commented on the color scheme of that one, just saying that we would be, you know, colorblind friendly. We would want
Might need to refresh the page or something. So I'm not sure.
Oh, I can see that comment.
Okay,
Matt.
good. Then it's coming through. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, for any of these colors, we could also consider having like stripes and things like that. You know, it's going to get horribly colorful pretty soon. But just going with one shade, like one color, different shades, it's completely unreadable when you have a lot of categories. So I wouldn't necessarily go with that. But is it okay to move on to the next one then?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So this is the same thing as the one above. Oh no, right now.
We're on.
So this is divided into clinical, professional, body, manufacturer, and this is the other way around, where it's I
think you're meant to move on to page 3.
Oh yeah, 1 sec. Sorry, I'm getting confusing myself. Yeah, this is where it's divided out into specialization. And specialization is one of the things that we should get consensus on, I think, because medical doctor covers, so all of the ophthalmologists, for example, are also medical doctors. So it's a little misleading in the count in a way. And same with the neurologists, whereas the others are not medical doctors mostly. And a lot of people didn't give any speciality. So yeah, it's how to deal with that is kind of more a matter of consensus than anything. But I changed doctor to medical doctor. That's all I've done. And otherwise it's the raw counts where you can have more than one thing selected. And a lot of people who didn't give speciality also didn't answer. Only one of them did.
So are you saying that medical doctor includes ophthalmologist and neurologist?
Yeah, this was, I think, a category Matt might have introduced based on whether they had clinical license or something like that.
I'm trying to remember what comment. Sorry, which question number are we on here?
Are you aware of any existing guidelines?
Okay, and then
I think it's question 45.
That's the yes or no, but I'm trying to work out where we categorize in orthoptist. So I'm going to try and find the word orthoptist. What is your clinical discipline? So there was you could choose orthoptist, clinical scientist, optometrist, and then there was another one you could choose was medically trained doctor (please speciality), and then the speciality for many people they wrote down neurologist, ophthalmologist, but some people didn't specify. So they could be any, but we don't know because they didn't give us that information.
Yeah. And so this is one example where we have categories that are now conflated. They're not mutually exclusive. And that's problematic a little bit for plotting and also for representing the data fairly, because it ends up looking like a lot more people responded. And actually it's just that they're a medical and an ophthalmologist or whatever other.
Can I suggest, Fiona, for this one, we could have medical doctor brackets unspecified, and then ophthalmologist and neurologist definitely fall into that same category because those people also ticked the box to say they were medically trained.
Yeah, it's just that now you have two questions that are both giving basically the same information. So when they said medical doctor and did give a specialization, they may also later have said ophthalmologist, and the way that's been coded counts it twice.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, okay. So we should remove that.
Doctor and have, if we know the subspecialties within medical doctor, could we have them as stacked pieces?
So here you can see the far right is people who didn't give any speciality. So the data is in there, but it's not very logical how it's coded with this medical doctor piece.
Oh, I see. I can see what's going on. If I actually look at the raw data itself, yeah, you're right. It was double counted, but there's actually 10 in total. So you've got 10 medical doctors, 6 are ophthalmologists, 3 are neurologists, and 1 didn't specify. So
I think,
those are 10.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for including specialties in the first place was because we had a feeling that different specialties might be aware of different guidelines and different sets of information. So I think it's helpful to keep it split by specialty. But where it's got medical doctor and in the figure, and it's essentially presenting the same information in duplicate, I would probably put that in the text and say there were 10 medical doctors. They are shown by specialty in the figure.
It's
I think you can just omit the. Sorry.
It's 13 medical doctors. I think it's the way it's being categorized is not very logical right now, because
we can see the 13 medical doctors is the ophthalmologist 6 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1. That's it. So they are just shown twice here. You can see the 3 neurologists were the ones that were the medical doctors that said they did know of the guidelines.
Right.
So it all adds up. So actually, you can just omit the medical doctor column, or the portion of the bar chart, because that is already shown again to the right under those 3 things.
Right. So I don't think that the medical doctor adds anything, is basically what
absolutely nothing. Yeah.
And so we should just it's not a very helpful category, but it's coming up because these are all coded in the same block with same Q number.
What I could do, Fiona, is I could change in the actual original CSV file. I can just pass out those individuals who said they were a doctor but didn't specify which, and then that named unspecified medical doctor.
Sorry, you're dropping out there, Matt.
Sorry, I'm saying what I can do in the original document, the CSV, is I can take those people who said they were a medically trained doctor but did not give a speciality and just label those specifically as unspecified medical doctor.
Yeah, I already have that by negation here on the right, no speciality given. So it's really about maybe changing the coding so that medical doctor is separate, because this is really based on the licensing question, right? Whether they have a medical license.
It's based on question question 8, in fact, which is what is your clinical discipline? And they first of all can choose medically trained doctor, but it says if that's the case, you must give your speciality. And it looks like there were several people who ticked it but didn't say their speciality.
But wasn't there also a question asking about, are you a medically licensed?
Oh, I'm not sure. It's not been fed through into this bit.
Okay, well, it's just flagging it.
I don't recall a question that's specific to license.
Or registered. It might have been like, are you a registered medical practitioner or something like this?
Yeah, I just think we show it once. And
I think it's a separate categorization to what's interesting here. So
I agree.
As Gemma does, I think it's more important to think about what are we trying to explore in this plot than, any kind of, final, categorization beyond what we want to show in the plot. And for me, the medical doctor is not adding anything.
Yeah. Fiona, is it easier from your perspective if we just hide that left 2 bars because they are just duplicated to the right, or is it easier that we go back and recode the original spreadsheet so you've got a category of unspecified medical doctor?
Well, where you have those numeric category, right, for medical doctor, just give it a different name so that it's not part of the same Q something cat.
Got it.
And because it's a separate issue to what the specialization is.
Understood.
And so I have given the no speciality given, and you can see that most of those people also didn't answer this question. So, but you can also see that there's very few people aware, because when you consider that this 3 and this 3 are the same people, it's basically saying a total of 4 people were aware of guidelines. Whereas if you didn't know how we'd categorize, you might be inclined to think it's 7, and it's not.
I'm wondering if we need this figure at all. Could we literally just say there were 4 respondents, 3 neurologists and 1 optometrist who responded that they were aware of clinical eye tracking?
I think that's a decision to make when you see all the different plots. So there's other plots that look at this a little bit too coming up.
Yeah, just because the numbers are so small, yeah, cool, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the issue with this, and I'm pretty agnostic, except to say that this looks like 7 people were aware and there weren't. There were 4, so that's not good. So I'll just move it on. So this one is, should guidelines for clinical eye tracking exist? And this first one looks at it in terms of whether I thought it was interesting to look at, well, what do the people who are actually doing eye tracking say, compared to those who really rarely do it or don't do it. And this was kind of interesting. So yeah, this is N is 46 because it's all the people who answered question 49, regardless of their question 45 response. So there was this question, are you aware? And so it's ignoring that and looking at this, should they exist? And yeah, there's a lot of people who didn't answer at all, mainly people who dropped out. But what you can see is that there's very few people who think they shouldn't, and a large majority who think they should, of those that answered. So there's not so much to say about this, but maybe the notes that people put on it could comment. This is one of those cases where it's not so easy to read because the y-axis is really weighted by this unknown category of people who didn't answer. Yeah, that's that one. Anyone have anything to say, or can I move on?
Can I just say something, because for figure 3 and figure 4, can you hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just for figure 3 and figure 4, I just think because we care yes or no answers. So another way is that to put it into 2 bars and just a yes and no. And for each yes, because we interested who said yes. So look at the composition of the professional, or as said, a registered doctor, or the career, the neurologist. So we care about who said yes. So it's,
well, that's a little biased to my mind. I think it should be fair. I think it's a decision to not answer.
For example, like for so are you aware of existing guidelines? So
no, this one isn't are you aware? This is should.
Yes, so yeah, I think a figure 3 and a figure 4, just because we care about the yes or no answers, but who said yes. So we look at the composition of people saying yes. Yeah, just the different way to present that. For this one, if you like, you have to really care about the different categories. But the interesting could be just a yes or no, and who said yes or no.
But so do you not think that it's relevant to look at people who abstained, like who were kind of neutral?
Yes, we don't care about the neutral. We just care about who said yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's the different way to look at that.
I would care, but if other people don't
yes,
care,
so you care. No. Yeah. Okay.
I think it is useful information to have. And again, it might just be a question of whether it's useful to put it on there as a bar or just put it in the comments underneath.
I mean, when you look at how many people it is, like it's 10 people out of the 40 or 34 who regularly perform and interpret eye tracking, 10 people have not answered. So I don't think it's by accident they don't answer. I think they basically are like, you know, I don't know. And that's not a non-answer in a sense. It's I think if you were to take out all of these do not answers from the people who have answered everything else, that would be misrepresenting the data.
I agree. I think this is useful information. I think where it's less useful potentially is where you've got the person who didn't respond to who they were, nor did they give an answer. That suggests they just clicked through the survey and didn't really engage. But the other people clearly engaged with the survey.
Yeah, and for those cases where people just don't complete it, that's another thing we need to look at. Like, what percentage of completion do we exclude? People completed less than whatever percent, do we just exclude them altogether? So that's a separate question. But for me, if you were to include the non-responders here, that would be misrepresenting the data.
So is the action here, Fiona, for us to go through all of the figures in this document and to add on comments where we think that figure, either we could remove it or omit it, or we could display the data slightly differently? So comments, just like C1's just added, you know, just like a different point of view, and we just kind of gradually collate those comments on the document.
And wherever there's disagreement, that's what we take to the wider group to get consensus. Because I don't want to dictate how it looks either. Welcome the disagreement, rather, you know, but because I'm just trying to plot it. I'm not trying to say what decisions should be made, but there's going to be other cases like this where, you know, the way you present the data can totally change the interpretation of it.
Absolutely.
So my kind of tendency in these plots is to display all of it, to be very unbiased. But I also think it needs to be consensus in terms of what is the point of this plot. You know, and to you know, make sure that it's showing what we consider relevant.
So in the interest of time, is there a particular one, because you've said it gets a little bit funky when we get lots of colours, is there a particular one that you want to show us that really kind of illustrates the difficulty?
Well, this one here, I think it's already, figure 4A is already pretty colourful, but this is kind of actually one of the less problematic ones, where I've divided it according to their role, you know, whether they perform eye tracking or not, and now looking at barriers to using eye tracking in clinical practice. And I think this is kind of interesting because you can see that the people who perform and interpret have more emphasized access and time, but also that they're research tools, whereas those who don't perform or interpret eye tracking, there's not very many of them answering this question. So it's potentially useful, but it's getting a little bit on the colorful side, but it gets much worse in the next one. So, you know, there's a number of ways to display data like this. And they could select multiple barriers here, so your total is going to be higher than, you know, n. But it's potentially interesting. For me, this is more a question of whether it's in the scope of the paper that we want to look at these barriers.
I do think that's helpful because we're trying to explore use and whether guidelines are helpful, and ultimately this may be the thing that changes. And I just kind of think if people are trying to go down this road and get involved in clinical eye tracking, and what they want is evidence to support their case or to support their development, I just think things like this would hopefully be helpful. because like you say, it's the people that are doing it and interpreting it are well aware that it's the time's a big factor, whereas other people seem less aware that time is the factor that's a barrier.
Yeah, and also interesting to note that very few people thought that knowledge was the barrier.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that this would be a useful thing for retesting in a few years' time, because the response research tools, people saying that the eye trackers aren't really used for clinical stuff, right? They're saying we primarily use them for research. I think that will hopefully change. Cost is obviously coming down, so we should see that change in the future too.
And for me, this would be really interesting to look at specialization because of things like ENT having used eye tracking for much longer.
Yeah, because access, I'm surprised that's not higher.
I think we have to be thinking of this in terms of like this as a one-off survey. This is the value of this survey increases massively when we repeat it, right? This is for something, and of course we will hopefully do a better job of it in the future in terms of how we target particular things. But I feel like this is useful for that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I get into specialization, and this is where things become a little bit birthday party.
So I will recode those medical doctors, so we have unspecified medical doctor up there as green, because obviously and duplicated. The other thing to point out is there is at least one person who classified themselves as a neuro-ophthalmologist, and therefore they actually do appear twice. So I'm wondering if maybe I should create another category of neuro-ophthalmologists just to avoid.
I think we need to be looking at collapsing categories rather than creating more, to be honest, because it's already so piecemeal. And I think there might be one ENT floating and not an any category that maybe should go into neurology.
Maybe they went under allied.
That would be strange.
Not true. Yeah, they're not really allied. Yeah.
But anyway, basically those categories need to be revisited, I think. But anyway, because this is so colorful, I looked at maybe this would be better as a heat map. So this is the same data presented in an alternate way, but again, medical doctor should go because it's double counting everyone, or double counting some people. So it's essentially weighting people with a medical license.
Yeah,
which is not good.
If we just had an unspecified medical doctor, then that would.
We just get rid of that category altogether. It's not relevant. The specialization is relevant.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I can just say that the ENT went under neurology, by the way, because I guess we assume that if you're using an eye track and you're an ENT, you're probably a vestibular neurologist. That is an assumption, but I think
that needs to go into the data handling appendix as well, because that is a decision. They might not be. They could be a surgeon who's looking at eye movements to see if some surgery to the bones are
true. Do we have a link to the data handling sheet so I can just check that now?
I mean, there's a lot to be done yet on the data handling sheet, so we haven't even started on the actual data handling in terms of the files that much. So just to say that this is another way to present the same sort of data where it can change whatever colors, but it's essentially just trying to show where the different specializations differ in their opinion here, and what are the pain points essentially for each specialization. You can see in the color code. So maybe it's here. So the notes here were that again, the specialities are multi-select. And multiple barriers could also be selected. So, this is just comments would be useful here to see if people agree with that this is useful. And,
I mean, I think it's useful. I think the stacked bar I find easier to interpret than the heat map. I struggle with the heat map personally.
Okay.
I think the stacked bar, once we've got rid of medical doctor and kind of refined those categories, will look a little cleaner. But I do think it's interesting that, you've got most orthoptists are saying access is the issue. And it's mainly ophthalmologists saying that they're not suitable. So I think it helps identify which professional groups or areas have that different view. So I like this figure.
Yeah. And actually, it is interesting that the ophthalmologists say it's not useful, because I've worked with ophthalmologists on a visual aid. And what was really surprising to me is that they don't think about the eye moving. For them, the eye is a stationary thing. So it's
yeah. Is it healthy? Is it not?
Yeah, they're looking at retina and everything, and really didn't think about the fact that it's in motion. It was very interesting, but it just goes to show how, you know, just different specialities can really be quite siloed.
Yeah, and I think, did you only have one neuro-ophthalmologist?
Yeah,
I think it was only one, yeah.
Because I bet they would give a different answer to an ophthalmologist.
Definitely, yeah, because eye tracking is their main measure.
yes, just one.
Yeah, okay. So I prefer the stacked bar personally.
Oh, wait, sorry, no, there is one who said they were neurology brackets neuro-ophthalmology / otto-neurology. So
And how did they end up?
Gosh.
they ended up just in the neurology column, but I think that is wrong, because they should also be in the ophthalmology column since they've mentioned ophthalmology.
So
You wouldn't call yourself, sorry, go on.
could you maybe try and tidy up those, because it's actually the specialization in medical doctor thing that's the most problematic for plotting right now.
Yeah.
And it seems like some of those decisions were pretty arbitrary. And maybe we just need to take a little bit of a closer look for clarity.
Can I just for clarity then, can you, I've taken, what I'm planning on doing is taking where it says cat doctor, I'm only allowing them to be in that category if they are a doctor who's said they're a medically trained doctor, but they have not fallen into another category because they haven't specified. Is that okay?
I would just remove the fact of medical doctor or not altogether from these plots, give it a different title in the variable so it's not considered part of the same categorization.
Yeah.
And then anyone who doesn't give us a speciality is just down as no speciality given, as I have here. It's very few anyway, as you can see.
Oh, okay. So so somebody would fall in the same category whether they ticked medically trained doctor and then not specified, or if they just said nothing, they would both be unspecified.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll create an unspecified column for you. Yeah.
Because there's in this figure, the grey is no speciality given.
Yeah.
But some have at least said they were a medically trained doctor. But yeah, maybe that's just confusing the picture. I'm happy that we just. Yeah.
I think if you've got people that have said neuro, ophthalmology, and otto, others, I think it's okay to put them in a neurology column in that category, but to specify that of the, I don't know, 5 neurologists or however many there were, one had also commented that they did neuro-ophthalmology.
Well, maybe, I'm sorry.
I was just going to suggest, is that better just in the text rather than creating another category that's another color on the graph?
I definitely would encourage not creating more categories. But what I was going to say was, right now people could choose several specialities, and that's in there primarily because they have to choose this medical doctor plus a speciality, right? If we make the decision that whether or not they're a medical doctor is a separate thing that's not so interesting for this purpose, then if we could make the categories mutually exclusive when we include no speciality given. So that would mean that even if someone says, I'm a neurologist and an ophthalmologist and all the things, that they don't appear 3 times.
Yeah, I think duplicating their response is probably less helpful than putting them in one category, but making it clear that
how many people that
the neurologist
yeah.
described themselves as, and then just kind of putting that in the text.
So where someone has described themselves as a neuro-ophthalmologist, are we moving into neurology?
That's something to bring for consensus, I think. So that's where they could be neurology, they could be ophthalmology.
There's only 2, by the way, of that.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing is to get consensus and describe it. So if that would be where in the data handling document, we would say 2 people describe themselves as neuro, as this and this, and we put them in these categories.
I would personally put neuro-ophthalmology under ophthalmologists.
Okay.
Because the neuro-ophthalmologists I work with are trained ophthalmologists that specialise in neuro.
Yeah.
Whereas we have a neurologist that comes to do our neuro-ophthalmology clinic, and he would still describe himself as a neurologist with an interest in
I'm happy with either way, and we can just describe it in the data handling.
I think it should be consensus based.
Do we want to do that by? Oh, you were developing a tool to do that consensus based.
Well, I put it already in as a placeholder. We just have to fill in what questions we want to bring to the group. But for me,
do you want me to add that as an action, Fiona? That
I think that would
review this.
Yeah, I think it's worth doing in general on this category of specialization and doctor or whatever, just to get that everyone agrees. The interesting thing is the speciality. We don't want people to be counted twice. We probably don't want people's voting or response to be counted twice, even across specialities. Therefore, the specialities should be mutually exclusive and include no speciality given category.
So that Google form doesn't currently have questions.
No, because it remains to be seen. This got kind of complicated, so it wasn't so straightforward to just put in my own questions there for everyone. So I think that when we clear up these coding errors, that will also be clearer. So I didn't want to put in 50 questions for consensus that are really coding errors. So I think whatever remains when we've clarified is what should go to the group. And just by using the tool, it just means people can check in and give their vote whenever, even if they're not at a meeting, and then nobody has to be like counting and keeping track of emails or comments.
So at the moment, I'm leaving them as both neurology and ophthalmology, and I've put a note in the data handling so it's as a placeholder for when we do make that decision, noting that it needs to be made.
Right. But I think we can also just, for the moment, maybe make them mutually exclusive categories for the purposes of plotting, based on the argument that we don't want anyone's vote to be counted twice just because they're multidisciplinary, and then get approval of that.
Okay, so for the interim, I'll create an extra category for neuro-ophthalmology. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying choose one to put them in and stick to it, but then approval from the group.
Fine, so I'll put them into ophthalmology for today, but I'll make a note that we're going to take that to the group. We may end up switching. Okay, understood.
Yes, yeah. And if there was a way to even reduce these categories further, it would certainly make plotting look a lot easier to interpret. So it'll show up again, like here's another figure where it's looking like how frequently do you perform eye tracking, and there's 2 measures of that. So this is the one that uses the daily, weekly, monthly, and unclear. But there's another one that's percentage based. So I've plotted both, and you can see that, you know, who is doing the most eye tracking and who is doing it quite rarely. So just to say that it's another one where the categories are pretty extensive right now, and medical doctors should probably go.
Okay.
Same for this one, where I've also kind of put a heat map just to see what a heat map looks like when there's a few less categories. But this is the other percentage-based one. What proportion of patients do you perform clinical eye tracking with? And you can see that most people are rarely or moderate. And yeah, this does change with discipline. So ophthalmologist looks, is it? Not ophthalmologist, orthoptist. Seem to be doing it the most frequently, along with ophthalmologists, but still it's rare. And then let me see, Yeah, this one, so this is for the different eye trackers that are used. And depending on whether we exclude the researcher or not, ICCAM would go to 1 to 2. But at the moment, because there was so many different eye trackers mentioned, what I did is put where a tracker only appears once, I put it into other and then listed them underneath the plot. So that's a pretty straightforward plot, I think, and much easier to read. But yeah, I've just taken a note there, so it's just to make sure it's okay to kind of put these all into other and just list them underneath, instead of having ones in, you know, another 10 or so categories.
We did have a discussion, I think, over the spreadsheet about the fact that some of these are several eye trackers all rolled into one. And
but I think we changed that in the categorization, right?
Oh, maybe we did.
Yeah, I think we took account of that.
Okay, fine.
So this is should guidelines exist by how often they do eye tracking, which I thought was interesting to consider as well. So it's interesting that the only people who said no, they shouldn't, are the ones who say they're doing eye tracking daily. Yeah, but it's a pretty straightforward plot. Yeah, and just to explain there that the number is 33 because question 49 reflects respondents not routed to that question. So did not answer for 49 weren't routed to that question, I think. And that's maybe something to clarify with Gemma. So the session frequency, this daily, weekly, monthly, unclear, it was a separate question to percentage of patients. And I don't know, I think it's interesting to look at who thinks there should be standards alongside how much they're actually using eye tracking. For me, that would be a pretty fundamental thing to look at. But depending on which of these frequency measures we take, you know, a lot of people seems they didn't answer this question 49. So I don't know if it would be possible to try and collate those responses, or if doing so would give us more data to work with. So just to show again, this is the patient-based one where we had 27. And this is the daily, weekly, monthly based one where we have 33. Are they the same people or different people? Were they routed different ways? I'm not sure. But it could be worth considering if there's any way to sensibly collate the two if we ended up with more respondents. Am I making sense?
Kind of. So you're looking for clarification on whether that is two different groups of people or whether they're potentially the same group of people.
Yeah, essentially. So it seems like maybe people were routed to these questions depending on what they'd answered before.
Okay.
And it's almost the same question, but
yeah.
It could be, for example, the other one that asks about patients only got routed to people who say they're medical doctors. I don't know.
So it's, I'll have to go back and have a little look. So it's this one, it's figure 7A, and it's figure, which is the other figure?
The 1 2 back. So the one on page 8, where it goes never, rarely, something like, I can't quite remember what the categories are. The text is tiny right now.
So you want to check how people got to this question.
Yeah,
and whether there is overlap.
Yeah, so the one question is question 10 and 29, which we've coded into a categorical variable, which is about the proportion of patients. And then the other question is Question 49, some kind of subset.
Okay.
So just some clarity on whether they're the same people or different people.
Yeah.
If it's the same people and N33 is the maximum number of useful information, then that's fine. But if collating them somehow might give us more, that could be worth considering.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see, again, it's like 4 people or 3 people saying they should not exist, and 2 people not answering here.
Okay.
But it's interesting that those who never do it or rarely do it, and even those who moderately do it, tend to think there should be. But those who do it most often, which is few, it's only 7 people, but they're more split in opinion.
Yeah, it's almost like the lack of, well, is it a leap to say the lack of guidelines is limiting
people getting into it?
Yeah.
Maybe. But I thought it was an interesting plot because there's a lot to talk about there.
Okay.
So that's why it's good to see, is there any more data we could include?
Okay.
So this figure is probably going to expose the most problematic thing from my point of view. And this is also the one where we still had a comment in the Excel file for bringing for consensus. And it seems like where people were asked which kind of eye movements do they assess, instead of giving eye movements, they gave diseases or conditions, which is not an eye movement. So we have, you know, this situation where we have saccades, nystagmus, pursuit mixed in with neurological, which to me, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, as well as palsies and strabismus. So it's just a really conflated variable right now. And I'm not sure if this should be teased apart into 2 different variables, one which is eye movements and one which is conditions, or whether we should even take something like, okay, well, if we're talking about strabismus, then we're definitely talking about this kind of eye movement analysis and add that to the variable for eye movements. I don't know, but I think that's really something to get consensus on.
Matt, did you have your hand up?
Oh, he's frozen.
Oh, I thought he had his hand up momentarily.
Yeah, he did, and then froze.
He may just pop back.
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying. Here's Matt.
Back. Sorry, I vanished at that moment. I put my hand up and then immediately it disconnected. Sorry, I don't know where you've got to in the conversation, but simply to say, yes, the neurological thing is problematic because palsies are often neurological. Strabismus can be neurological.
Yeah, but they're also
nystagmus indeed as well. And again, it was a misunderstanding of the question, I think. I don't know how to do. I mean, we could just say people, just have a discuss it in the text. Maybe say we didn't include these in the chart, but many people were asking for this, and it can just be a narrative thing, perhaps.
I think it's miscoded because eye movements are one thing, conditions are another.
Absolutely.
It's conflated here. So either dump this all together, or my opinion, which will be a strong opinion, I would say either dump this all together or create 2 separate variables, one which is the conditions and the other which is eye movements. And if you go with 2 separate variables, in some cases, like strabismus, we know exactly which eye movements are analyzed, right? Other cases, particularly neurological, which is so broad, I don't know what that's supposed to mean here, in terms of which eye movement measures. What does that mean, neurological?
Yeah, I mean, they're basically describing patient type, aren't they? Patients coming with neurological signs and symptoms.
But they're also describing saccades and nystagmus and pursuit issues and so on. And I'm sure everyone who described themselves as neurological probably also does VOR measures like whatever. So that's a different eye movement. But essentially, as it stands right now and as it's being coded right now, for me, this is not a useful. It's not usable because it's too conflated.
I've actually just
putting saccades in the same plot as neurological or strabismus. I just can't. I tried to see could I make sense of this in any way, and I really think it's just really problematic.
I've just looked at question 51. Actually, it wasn't misinterpreted. It's what we wrote. The question was, which scenarios, conditions, or eye movements do you think there should be guidelines for clinical eye tracking? So actually, we did kind of conflate them all in the question. So that is the problem.
It seems to me like this graph doesn't really tell us that. It doesn't really tell us anything. It's just a description of the answers that people happen to put, rather than providing any useful insight.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think that needs to be then a limitation for us, doesn't it, in the discussion that we obviously invited a response, and what you get, you get what you ask for, which is a very heterogeneous.
Was it a text-based response?
Yeah.
So you could recode it as different categories.
Right, yeah. Because a lot of people get multiple things. They said, "Are you testing of nystagmus, testing of saccades, and any neurological conditions and endocrinological conditions as well, things like that." It
could be recoded into separate categories. One for condition or clinical problem, I don't know, and one for related eye movements, which we could infer from within the group if we wanted to. But yeah, it's an example of a question that produces data that's very hard to use without some further work, at least. So it would be, I think of all the things in all the plots, this is probably the one that's most important to bring to the group.
I'm just going to post, this is an example of this is just a random example of the response to that question. So, people were listing all kinds of things here. And some of these are conditions, Parkinsonian conditions, and some of them are specific eye movement types. Nystagmus is both a condition and an eye movement type. Yeah, it's a bit of a mess of a question.
No, but this is very easy to recode.
But how do we, for the conditions, do we put multiple sclerosis and Parkinsonisms into a neurological category, or should they each be their own category? Because some people would use a broader term.
You could just, you could even have a text-based variable for condition, and then parse out the eye movements, maybe.
Is this a case for a word cloud, possibly? I know that word clouds aren't particularly popular sometimes, but this might be a case for it.
I don't think the way you plotted makes any difference to the central problem, which is that conditions and eye movements are conflated.
Yeah, looking as it is on figure 8, it's almost like you want a line down the middle and you want conditions on one side and then you want eye movements on the other. So you're presenting everything people have said, but you're trying to separate them and say, these have talked about pursuit. But we've obviously got 10 responses for saccades, but then in what Matt has said, saccade latency, anti-saccades, double-step saccades, that's probably very different to somebody else who's just going to do saccades to the right, saccades to the left.
Well, they're more into paradigms, like the anti-saccade is a paradigm. It's not an eye movement.
Yeah.
And the anti-saccade is looking at executive function from saccades, but the measures are saccades, and particularly saccade latency, actually, which is also known as fixation duration. So it's not an eye movement, it's a paradigm in that case.
And And this survey was kind of constructed before ISCET had decided, how we were going to arrange the standards, whether it will be based on eye movement type or condition. And so we didn't really have our thinking straight at that point.
Yeah, and it's these results that have informed that. So, and I think, we kind of come all the way back around to, are we going to look at specific conditions or are we going to look at eye movements? And that's why this has probably got a real mixture of things within it.
I do think that it's possible to sensibly separate this variable. I just don't think it's very useful as it is right now.
So recoding into conditions is definitely something I can do. I can add, a bunch of columns. We will always have some people who just responded with neurological conditions as a broad category, and so the question would be, and then we can say these are eye movement paradigms, these are conditions, these are broad categories of conditions, but how do we reconcile that?
Well, this could be a case where we actually just make a text-based variable,
right?
And just standardize the terms so that they can be plotted.
So I could take this answer, for example, and I would just change INO to internuclear ophthalmoplegia, make sure that Parkinsonisms is spelt the same way, Parkinsonian disorders, I suppose, like PSP and so on, because somebody else might call that PSP, right?
Just say Parkinson's.
But it's Parkinson's light. This is how you diagnose things like PSP, isn't it, for vertical saccade? Yeah,
but that's a disease, not an eye movement. Or sorry, it's a condition, not an eye movement.
Yeah. But if we lump
a separate variable for eye movements, then you put in saccade, fixation.
I think we just have to present, more accurately describe the question that was asked and say X% answered in terms of eye movement and X% gave clinical conditions. And I just wonder whether something like a pie chart here would be better. So you're just presenting all of the responses, but you're just dividing, like you're showing the split.
There's going to be a lot of, so things like here we've got double step saccades. Would we just call that saccades, or would we actually have that as its own category?
It's a saccade-based measure.
Yeah, but then do you put anti-saccades in with saccades? I mean, again, it's
saccade and fixation-based measure.
I think then you're probably best to show it as a table, aren't you? And then you're best to say saccades X number, but then these were listed.
I really don't think the problem is how to display them. There's many ways to display them. That's not the issue. For me, the problem is a logical error. It's like it's conflating, and there's going to be massive overlap between the disease type and eye movements. It's just a classic error in a questionnaire to string a whole lot of unrelated things into a question, because the data you get back isn't really usable. So it could be, we could probably sensibly parse it out into those separate things that were asked. But it's a question of whether we should do that. And if we do that, I definitely don't think we should be considering anti-saccade as either a disease or an eye movement. It's a paradigm.
Okay.
And that paradigm is based on fixation duration and saccade amplitude.
Yep.
So the question was, as Matt said earlier, which scenarios, conditions, or eye movements?
Yeah. And scenario is very general. That can mean anything.
Conditions and eye movements is easy, right? We can agree.
Right.
Anti-saccades is not an eye movement. The saccade is an eye movement. Fixation is a kind of eye movement. There are movements within it.
It is an eye movement.
Conditions.
I think we put scenarios thinking people might say, well, I don't know what condition they've got. I'm using this in the scenario where I have a new adult coming to a neuro-ophthalmology clinic and we're trying to, so I think that's why we had scenarios.
Yeah.
Because somebody's put here post-op results. Well, that could be post-op anything. That could be post-op strabismus, post-op nystagmus.
Yeah. We're trying
So
to
that's a
quantify.
It can also
scenario.
be post-op for facial surgery,
Yeah.
you know, to see if the bone changes in the bone structure have been, you know, after repairing a cheekbone or something.
Mm. Should we? I mean, does word cloud sound like a way we could do this once we standardize the terms?
I don't think the
Yeah.
problem is how we display.
I like the idea of word cloud. Yes, I think it to present this condition or diagram, or it's just it's just the to answer the questions. Then we can summarize. Yes, maybe they favor on the condition rather than on the diagram or something. Yes, I would favor in cloud words to present that.
But as
I
Fiona
think
said,
that's
the
a good
issue
idea.
is more about the fact that we've conflated multiple things together. So you could do potentially a word cloud for eye movements and for
Yes.
conditions.
And put everything there: Parkinson's, TBI, stroke. Now we can summarize some. Yes, I think that the question is to ask whether we based on eye movement types, or based on disease, or based on something we are not sure at that moment. So I think that then neurological probably they favoring on the type of disease.
Well, we wouldn't see that in a word cloud. We wouldn't know.
Oh yes, cloud. You can the more the often frequent words will be bigger, so you can see that.
You wouldn't know. You
that's
wouldn't know
more
how they
frequent.
associate with each other. You know.
Yeah,
But,
so that's for reader to judge that. We just present that result.
So this question in the questionnaire was, which do you think there should be guidelines for?
Yeah.
So I get the point. We've asked a question and we've got responses, but I think that are a bit of a mess. But I think we just have to present it, categorize that as best you can.
But wasn't the question which eye movement types are assessed clinically?
So question 51.
I just pasted it in the chat.
Oh, okay. And then, so what I've done is on this plot is base it on your categorizations, right, Matt?
Yes, which we
Right.
did. Yeah, which are pretty arbitrary by the looks of it now.
Yeah, and it's that arbitrary categorization that's the problem, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because, for example, I don't see anti-saccades or any of these other things in this example one on this plot. I think word clouds have their use when you're looking for free text with opinions, but it doesn't at all for me solve the issue of just the conflation of different things here. And if I look at this example that Matt's pasted of one of the responses, I don't see that response at all in this plot. And I don't think you would in a word cloud either, because we've got 22 people here. So for a word cloud, you'd usually be looking at a lot more data.
Yeah, so this one I posted the example I've got categorized as saccades and nystagmus and neurological. That was how they were lumped together.
But there was also pursuit, palsies, and strabismus, right?
Yeah, so they didn't mention pursuit or palsies or strabismus in that response, so that's how we categorized them.
Anyway, just to say, I think it's worth revisiting that categorization and getting some consensus.
Yeah.
And I don't care about plotting it. We can do it any way of a number of ways. It's pretty straightforward, but I think solving that more fundamental issue is needed first, and then what way to plot it can come after.
Okay.
So yeah, to be continued.
Okay.
Or included, if you think look, this isn't really adding anything to the article, that's also valid, you know.
And then you've got the last figure on here, Fiona.
Yeah.
Number 9.
So this is quite straightforward.
Yeah,
you could do both. Nice. You could do one or the other. It's like the simplest plot of the whole lot.
Like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So actions from today then are, I'm going to ask everybody to review this document as it is and to add comments about, are there any figures that we can remove? About the no responses or unknown data, is that better in a figure or separately in the text? Are there any other specific things we want to ask people to comment on?
About that category we just talked about at length? Should that be parsed out into eye movements versus conditions or whatever? Or is it actually adding to the article at all? Like, do we need it? Because at the moment it's a difficult to use.
Fiona, did you pull out all the comments from the last version of the spreadsheet? Have we got those in this document?
Some of them, like the neurological one was also coming up there.
Yeah.
But some of them are more where I think there wasn't quite 3 people. So that last round is what you got. I didn't look at the final comments before I extracted CSV because we just wanted to build up to 3.
Yeah, and I think that's now been done. I think there was just a few comments that were for the group to decide. So what I can do is I can go through and make sure that if they're not currently in the PDF, I'll comment so that they are then included there rather than us having to go back to the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I can also add you to the overleaf document that produced this if you want, Matt.
Okay, yeah, fine. And I will create a version where we have made decisions today. I'm going to update the CSV. I'm just wondering, where should I be putting that? Is that going to go into a shared folder now rather than being emailed between us?
Yeah, I think maybe that depends on whether or not it might be worth having a separate Google Drive that's secure just for us. Because like I said, when I try and put something in and then move it into a folder, it ends up staying where it is and putting shortcuts into the folder, and then I can't even delete the shortcuts. So anything at all I do in Gemma's drive is leaving this really embarrassingly messy sort of like streaks all over the file structure. So I don't know if that's the best.
Okay, well, for the time being, what I do today is I'll send it back to the smaller group by email. So we've got that.
Okay.
It will just be the CSV, so you don't have to worry about all that additional
space. Yes, exactly. The CSV is much more robust to different operating systems and so on.
And then we'll all go through the PDF, making comments and suggestions and so on. And then at some point, then maybe Gemma will just say, right, go, let's do it. And then I'm happy to implement those changes if decisions have been made. Fiona, were you going to be doing consensus-based things somehow?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's worth going to the full group to specify, is this one in the wrong place, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to kind of separate out those kind of questions from the ones where we truly need consensus, like this neurological category or like the medical doctor category. And then we can put them into this little tool just where people vote and we get a result without anyone having too much effort at collating it, would be the idea.
So what's the most helpful thing to do to keep this on track then? Should we give people a deadline for adding comments to the PDF?
Yeah.
What do you think is reasonable here? Like 2 weeks?
2 weeks seems reasonable for most of the time, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe do that after Matt's gone through. So that I can rerun the plots as neat. You know, the plots will look slightly different after Matt's gone through and recoded.
Okay, I'll do that today.
Okay.
So there's only a few changes that were discussed today already, and then I'll make sure that all the comments are in the PDF that relate to any questions that we had outstanding that are not already there. And then, if you were going to do replotting, then by all means go for it. From that.
Yeah. So if you do that today, I'll share the overleaf so you can add the comments directly into these note places here. and then I'll rerun the plots in the overleaf. And the good thing would be if Gemma can just delete everything that I put up, because we're about to have multiple copies of everything otherwise.
Okay.
And Gemma, when you're asking for people's feedback within 2 weeks, you could maybe do that in the context of what we mentioned about authorship and, you know, a kind of approach to that.
So basically, I'm not asking people to comment now. I'm waiting for you guys to run a new version. Is that right?
Yes, so Fiona will give the go ahead after she's got what she needs from me.
Okay. If you do that today, Matt, then I'll rerun the plots either today or tomorrow.
Brilliant. Okay.
Okay, and then I'll send that out to everybody.
Yep.
I'm going to stop the recording now.
Yep.
That was a long one.